Welcome to All Things Moore County, Moore County's weekly radio show highlighting the many facets of the Sandhills. That includes real estate, lifestyle, community and neighborhoods. And now from 4 Properties, here's your host, Bill Sahadi.
Good morning and welcome to the talk show, All Things Moore County. Dorothy, it's not a coincidence that summer is heating up.
It's here with a vengeance.
I mean, in one way or the other, every day is getting hotter and hotter.
Yes.
Used to be that I would go home in the evening after work, and I would turn on the TV and I would catch up on the day's news. And, you know, I just took in what I took in and went on to the next day.
Right.
In the last couple of years, it's gotten to a point where I've actually kind of walked away from the TV. I can't take the all the partisanship.
Yeah, I agree.
Oh my God! I mean, the warring factions, the conversations about the state of our country, our politics, this and that.
Everything.
I'm exhausted.
So am I.
I mean, do you get that It's like it's overkill.
It is. Very much overkill.
So, a couple of years ago, we had Lowell Simon on. Lowell was teaching Union Pines High School and had come in with a group of his students, and he was a businessman himself, and he was teaching not math, not algebra, not geometry, but he was teaching life lessons to kids to help make them more self-sufficient, to kind of understand the world, what it takes to move forward, to self-generate, so to speak. And I am very drawn to people like that. And lo and behold, Lowell has evolved over his career, which we're going to talk to him about many times, and he's doing it one more time right now, where he is running the North Carolina House of Representatives race, District 52. So he's taking his brand of living to another level, and it's kind of all about sharing. And I think we're going to wind up having a, hopefully not a nonpartisan conversation, but just a conversation to the middle, a conversation about our lives, our expectations, his aspirations, his motivations, and it should be very interesting.
Okay.
Lowell, I want to say, first of all, thanks for coming in this morning. You've lived here in Moore County for 23 years. What brought you here?
What brought me here was I came from Raleigh and took a job in Montgomery County, Troy, and had one young kid, and obviously we had planned on having more family.
Right.
And what mostly appealed, of course, was the beauty. When I saw Seven Lakes, I knew right away that my wife would love it.
Right.
But also the school system in Moore County. We knew we wanted our children to go to a good school system, and we thought the public school system in Moore County was excellent.
Right.
Which it was at the time. It's maybe not quite where it was before.
We're stretched right now, aren't we?
We are.
And that's one of the conversations we're going to be having today. The demographics here in Moore County have shifted so much since the year 2000, with the military families moving into town, the average age shrinking, getting lower and lower. What people are moving here for might be different from what it was in 2000. But North Carolina is seeing a lot of growth.
And I think Moore County is certainly as well. And for us, we were sort of part of that trend. We came and brought a family and raised a family here. And we've seen that a lot particularly at Seven Lakes. We've seen that transition from sort of a retirement community to young kids at the pool and kids at the playground, and we watched that change. We've been kind of part of it and lived it.
Yeah. What is it about your education that has put you in a position today where you've sort of been paying it forward and giving back? Where was the inspiration?
You're talking about my formal education or my informal education?
Well, whatever it was that during your formative years that left an impression. you're trying to pass that on to today's students in the Moore County school system.
Well, was up until I retired from the school system. But,
Right.
My father was an immigrant. My father, at age 12, escaped the Nazis in Germany when his family had to escape. And we didn't think of it, we didn't use these terms in those days, but he was an entrepreneur. He started out in a business and eventually owned his own business and was reasonably successful at it. We lived a reasonably comfortable life. But that belief that you can make something of yourself,
Right.
that you don't always have to depend on others to pull you up. And don't get me wrong, it helps to have people pull you up. And certainly my dad, as an immigrant, had family who helped him get here. But that whole way of growing up, and again, we didn't, entrepreneur was hardly a word in those days. You didn't use it. He was a self-employed guy. That's how
Right.
we thought of him.
Right.
But that was the environment in my house, was that you had to take care of yourself. You had to do what what you could do. You worked hard. In my day, I didn't even know there was an option to not go to college. I don't know
Right.
if my parents allowed me to know that was an option.
Right.
We had that ethic that you had to do the best you were able to do.
Right. We were brought up similarly. I grew up in New York, in Brooklyn, and my dad was second generation from Lebanon. And we always thought college was just something you did. It was just the next progression, right? But he taught us independence. He taught us to think for ourselves. He taught us to take full responsibility for everything you do. And if you make mistakes, you own them. You don't look to pass the buck. And you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think that was certainly the environment in my home. My father, I'm sure like your grandfather,
Yeah.
didn't speak a word of English when he came.
Right.
He had to learn it on his own,
right.
through his family.
Right.
And he ended up going to, you may know, Stuyvesant High School.
Oh, sure.
Which
sure.
was one of the most prestigious high schools in Brooklyn.
That's correct.
And he did that really on his personal brilliance. And, he learned English, and 5 years later, or 4 years later, really, he was in Stuyvesant High. So he did not go to college himself. My mom did. And he went straight into working, and like I said, eventually was able to start his own thing.
So you you started your career in business as an entrepreneur. You moved to or evolved into teaching. And so a lot of people are going to say, why in the world would you do this to yourself and move into the field of politics, especially with the banter that's the background noise 24/7 these days. And it is exhausting.
And a lot of people are asking that exact question. Why would you do this to yourself? Yes.
Right.
And I think the answer is that for me it was the next logical step.
Right.
I wasn't an entrepreneur all my life. I started out working for other people, just like most of us do, and eventually became an entrepreneur and started some of my own companies. And in 2006, when I sold my company, I thought at age 50 I would retire, and retirement was not for me. I did not.
Last 3 days and you're bored out of your mind.
Yeah, it lasted a little longer than that, but not much, maybe about 10 months, I think. I sold my company in August of 06, and by fall of 07, I was teaching math at Union Pines. And for me, it was about wanting to give something back. I'd always been involved in the community. I've always tried to do things within the community. And I liked being around young minds. I liked being around those people that were trying to figure things out and trying to help them. And I thought I could bring something different to teaching, having lived in what my students always called the real world, as opposed to having only studied geometry, algebra, and
Right.
calculus like you were talking about.
Right. Which I didn't study too well.
Well, yeah, my first job as a teacher was teaching geometry, and I told my students,
Yeah.
take your entire life,
Right.
double it, and it had been longer than that since the last time I looked at a geometry book.
Right. Right.
And I just happened to love math, so that was good. But I thought I could bridge that gap between those kind of subjects that kids think, why do I need this? And be able to tell them, here's why you need it, because I lived there, I did it, I knew, I used geometry, I used algebra, I used those things. Here's why you need to learn it.
Right.
And here's where it's going to apply in the real world.
Right.
And the truth is, I think that very much relates to why I think I can bring something different to the state legislature as well.
Mm-hmm.
That I think I have a different way of looking at things. I have a different background from most of the people there. Having, first of all, been in business, which is not all that unique as far as state legislatures are concerned, but
Right.
but also having raised 3 children through the public school system in Moore County. All 3 of my kids graduated from Pinecrest. And then as a parent, and then as a teacher, having lived inside the school system and talking with those young kids and talking with educators and trying to figure out ways to make education valuable, I think that's a unique background.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm hoping that I, just like I was able to do at school, bring something different, that I could bring something different there as well.
How do you find your reception in speaking to the public when the TVs are off and people can hear you rather than hear the stuff that they listen to? How is your message being received?
The message, I think, is being received really well. I have been pleasantly surprised, and I know you don't want to talk too much partisanship here, but I think a couple things are happening. One is that Democrats are coming out of hiding.
Right.
And we've been sort of, keeping a low profile for a long time.
Right.
And they're starting to see that there are choices. And not necessarily choices that are all the way one way or all the way another way, but choices that represent some of their ideals and some of their values.
But isn't it true that a successful candidate today is going to draw not just from Democrats but centrist Republicans at the same time? Isn't the middle road the best way to move forward?
It is, yes. The middle road is.
Dogs notwithstanding in the background.
Yeah, I think they were agreeing with you.
Oh my goodness! Only in this station, only in this studio.
I think they were agreeing that the middle ground is the place to be. Yes, I think that's what that dog was saying.
They miss the civility of the Reagan years. That's what it is. That's what they're crying for.
But to your point, yeah, I think that yes, there has to be some balance.
Right.
And what I was kind of getting ready to say is that the other thing that I have found interesting and surprising has been that there are a lot of Republicans who are also not happy with some of the things that they're seeing.
Right.
Forgetting the fact that there's a huge amount of people in the middle that is unaffiliated, independent voters.
Right.
But there's also a lot of people on the Republican side of the coin that are feeling like we're starting to lose that sense of balance.
Yeah.
And as I like to say, some of my best friends are Republicans.
Right.
I was appointed by 3 different speakers of the House to political positions from both parties, 2 Democrats and 1 Republican,
Mm-hmm.
because I can cross over that bridge. I do understand that there's a middle ground somewhere, and we need to search out what we have in common.
Earlier in the year, we had a guest on from California, Peggy Grande. Peggy came here to speak at the Reagan dinner. Peggy was the executive director for Ronald Reagan after he left office for 8 or 9 years. She wrote a book, and it was called The President Will See You Now. And she was a very compelling speaker, and I was really taken by her conversation, and she talked a lot about, as a Republican, the civility of those years, which I'm guessing you grew up in the Reagan years.
I did.
Okay.
I'm old enough to remember, absolutely.
I'm guessing. Well, I go back to Jimmy Carter, so I'm guilty. But she
I'm guilty because I go back further, but go ahead.
she yearned for the civility of the Reagan years when there was a lot of bipartisanship, where there were a lot of Democrats and Republicans speaking to one another. And say what you want about Ronald Reagan, Democrats and Republicans did speak, and they did move forward together.
Yeah, that was a different era, unfortunately.
Right.
And we really do need to get back to that, to
Right.
where politicians are looking out for their constituents, and we know that the country is fairly equally divided. We know that the state is fairly equally divided. We know that the county is maybe not fairly equally, but still
Right.
substantially divided. And no one can represent one side. Otherwise, you're leaving out such a huge portion of people, and we can't do that. We have to represent everybody.
It's going to be an interesting campaign year. We can't get away from it, and we wanted to have you come on earlier now, and probably later on in the year, closer as we get to election time. But you are running against Jamie Bowles in District 52, and if this is his third, he's up for his fifth. Excuse me. You need to educate me.
Sorry.
So there are differences that you want to point out, and there are reasons why you've decided to challenge an incumbent like this.
Yeah, and Jamie is up for his fifth term.
Right.
He's been in office 10 years.
Right.
He has never had an opponent in the general election before, other than the year he was elected. So since he's been in office, he's never run against anyone in the general election.
Right.
He has had a couple of opponents in the primaries.
And a couple of close calls, if I recall.
And both of them were close, but not partially because Democrats have not put out a candidate. We're in a red county, but my opinion is that the legislature as it is, especially now, and I think it's unfortunately getting worse, not better, and that is that they are really just self-serving.
Yeah.
And, the things they're doing with the constitutional amendments are just pure power grabs. And really before that, to me, we need balance. We need to be able to, I know that I don't feel represented. And I know Jamie, I've been involved in the county for 23 years. Jamie's been my rep for 10 years. So I know Jamie, and I like him as a person, and he,
Yep.
he does some good things in the community. But I really think that the Republican Party these days, and really parties in general, I'm sorry to say, but are too divided. They're too much looking out for their own interests. They're too self-serving, like I said, and they're not trying to find where they agree. They're not trying to find where they can work together.
The concept of a servant's heart has sort of gotten lost, number one. Number two, I think everybody today is aware about how important voting really is. And I think in the last 2 or 3 years, people have had that driven home. We're going to come back in the second set. Our conversation today is all about the upcoming election in District 52 for the North Carolina House of Representatives. And we will be back with Lowell Simon in a minute. Welcome back to our second set. Our conversation is with Lowell Simon today about his upcoming House race, and we kind of closed out the first set a little bit talking about working truly with a servant's heart. And there's a lot of distrust for politicians, and I'm not sure how many idealistic people there are left that you're speaking to. one of the realities that I've seen, especially here in Moore County, the economy has been pretty good. There are a lot of people that I know that are doing fairly well. And I think there are a lot of people who are not doing so well that feel even more disenfranchised than ever before. Moore County is a tale of two counties. You have two different conversations to have depending on where you go. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that the economy is going really well for some people and really badly for other people.
Right.
And like we were talking about before, the divide is pretty close.
Getting bigger and bigger.
and the separation is getting bigger and bigger. You're right.
Yeah.
And, the way that the economy is going, and having been sort of a, amateur economist in teaching math and business,
Yeah.
The economy is moving more and more toward benefiting the wealthier people.
Mm-hmm. And
unfortunately, it is a zero-sum game. That is, it's a pie that can only be divided so many times. And the people that are not getting the advantages of this economy, as we give, I hate to get into, you were talking about Reaganomics, so I hate to get into trickle-down economics.
Yeah.
But it's my belief that trickle-down economics is a myth and it does not work.
Right.
And I think we've seen that with the tax breaks that have come out in the last year and a half, that have basically, I shouldn't say basically, that have almost exclusively benefited the wealthy. And that money's getting put back into stock, and then stock companies that are public are doing stock buybacks and basically giving the money back to the people who got the tax break in the first place.
Right.
And most people, half of the people out there don't own any stock. They don't have 401ks. They don't have retirement plans. They don't have stock options.
That's right.
And so they're not living badly. They're living okay day to day.
Right.
But they might have $1,000 in savings. And they're one accident, one broken leg, one visit to the emergency room away from everything being gone. Mm-hmm. And that's not right. That's not the way we ought to be in this country. Right. We're kind of, walking close toward healthcare issues here, which are something that's very important to me. I'm on one of the boards of Moore Regional Hospital. I'm on the board of First Carolina Care, which is a health insurance company. And so I've been there for 13 years. And I've had the opportunity. I started there as a customer, and eventually, when I sold my company, went on to their board. And so, again, got to see things from both perspectives as a consumer of health insurance and working with a seller of health insurance. And in my opinion, health insurance or health care is kind of upside down. We reward providers for visits. We reward providers for doing tests, for prescribing medications. We don't really reward providers for curing us.
Right.
And we don't incentivize providers. We don't incentivize patients to take care of themselves. We don't do those things. A guy walks. I was talking to my orthopedist. I have some knee trouble, and I was talking to my orthopedic surgeon, and I figured, well, surgeons do surgery. And he said, no, you don't need surgery yet. He said, but we started talking politics, of course, pretty much everywhere I go these days.
Right.
And he said, I have a patient that comes in, and he's 100 pounds overweight. Mm-hmm. And he wants knee surgery. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, lose 50 pounds and then come back and we'll talk about it, which makes perfect sense to me. And I was proud of my doctor for saying that. But as an insurer, if we can get patients to take care of themselves, if we can incentivize them to do the things, whether it's quit smoking or whether it's lose weight or whether it's exercise, there's so many things that people can do to make themselves, to improve their health.
Right.
That if we can incentivize them, then as an insurer, that means that patient is a lower risk, which is good for us.
Right.
Obviously, it's good for the patient, So we have to incentivize the providers to say, you need to do these things for your health before we talk about surgery, tests, medications, whatever. Let's do these things first. And that's very doable. And some doctors are doing it, frankly, but not many.
So I hear what you're saying, and I hear a lot of people who talk about this in the same tone and tenor that you do. What can one person make a difference? How can one person make a difference? There are so many idealistic notions out there, and some of it seems, honestly, just to a layman like myself, insurmountable against what you're walking into, be it the state legislature, any form of government, with as fractured as things are, and the healthcare issue is one of the strongest partisan divides that we have.
There is no question in my mind that one person can make a difference.
Okay.
And we see it, from the Old Testament.
Right.
When Moses says, "What can I do?" and God says, "I picked you, go do it." To the New Testament, I think we know who the hero of that story was. There's no question that one person can make a difference. And how do you do that? You do that by getting involved. You have to get involved. You can't sit on, that's why I'm running, because I've never been a person who can sit on the sidelines.
Uh-huh.
But I can't sit on the sidelines and watch the things that I think are hurting people. And so, yeah, I believe one person, of course it starts with one person. It doesn't end with one person.
Right.
But one person can make a difference.
So one of the things that I see in our government, in our operations, with the fringes sort of dominating the news cycles every day, and there are fringes on both sides that are equally, it's awful.
Not sure if equally, but I understand. I agree.
Okay. I'm saying equally because I want to be in the middle here. It will take a lot of courage for a lot of the people inside both fringes to change. I don't see a lot of courage today in our political system. I see a lot of followers, and I don't see a lot of independent thinkers who are willing to stand up and speak out.
I'm not sure I agree with you on that one, Bill. I think
Disagree.
I think there is a lot of courage out there. I'm not sure it's all directed in the right way.
Okay.
I think what the Republicans have done with these constitutional amendments was pretty gutsy. Like I said, not in the best interest of North Carolinians.
Right.
But it was pretty gutsy.
Okay.
And I think their motives are wrong. I think their policies are wrong. I think what they're trying to accomplish by doing this is wrong. But I'm not sure I would say it lacked courage.
Can you speak a little bit about these constitutional amendments?
Sure.
Specifically?
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, there are 6 of them that will be on the state ballot, plus we'll be faced with another one that it's not a constitutional amendment, but another referendum that'll be part of Moore County, which is the sales tax, which I assume that the county commissioners are going to continue with.
Right.
We can talk a little bit about why that's even a question. But there are 6 constitutional amendments. So one of them is a couple of them are, but one of them specifically is to take control from the governor, from any governor, but from our current governor, but any governor in the future, because it's a constitutional amendment.
Right.
And take the control of who gets appointed to committees and commissions, like, who's in charge of water quality, who's in charge of air quality, who's in charge of the judicial systems, all of these committees that have historically been appointed by the governor in vacancies. And I was an appointee of the governor at one time and an appointee of the Speaker of the House at one time. Take that all and move it over to the state legislature. So again, they're grabbing all that power.
Right.
Another one is doing essentially the same thing with judges, with judicial vacancies.
Mm-hmm.
Again, taking away the governor's legal right to make those appointments and giving it to themselves. So those are a couple that go down that road.
Mm-hmm.
There is another one that is putting a cap, or is changing the cap, on income tax in the state, which is essentially trying to keep their agenda locked into the Constitution,
Right.
essentially forever.
Right.
And they have compromised a little bit. They started out at 5.5%. They've gone to 7%. But they're again trying to lock their agenda in,
Right.
so that when they lose this supermajority that they have come November, that they will still be able to control what we're doing and keep
Right.
whoever you elect, whoever I elect, whoever Talia elects, whoever we elect,
Sort of hamstrung.
from being able to do the things that you send them there to do.
Right. Again, it seems like it's the antithesis of serving with a servant's heart. We've got to break and come back. In the third set, our guest is Lowell Simon. He is running for the 52nd District in that state legislature. We're going to have a chance, hopefully, to speak with him as well later this year. We'll be right back. Welcome back to our final set with Lowell Simon. Lowell, I moved here in 1999. Kind of hard to believe. It's going to be 20 years. Now I feel like I'm a native, which I'm not, but every year I get more and more invested and more involved in Moore County. And we've had an opportunity on this show to have so many nonprofit groups come on, so many well-intentioned people doing things for others, and it's really a nice thing to see, and the show has kind of morphed into that. But one of the things we always seem to say is Moore County is a tale of two counties. So specifically the haves and the have-nots, the rural part of our county, you referenced them a little bit, suffering, being a little disenfranchised. What's your message? What do you tell those people about jobs? Because they're not the ones that we're measuring how good the economy is right now. They're all here in southern Moore County, and they're out at restaurants and having a good time, and life is good. Life isn't so good.
Life isn't so good for a lot of us in Moore County. You're right.
Right.
And it is kind of a tale of two counties. We do have certainly the wealthier parts and the folks that are not doing as well. Right. And the question is, so how do we move some of those jobs, and how do we incentivize those kinds of things? And one of the problems that we have in Moore County is what's called the tier system, which is how our sales tax gets divvied up, and basically essentially all of the sales tax that we collect in Moore County goes to other counties. And we certainly want to help poorer counties, but the thing is, we have some parts of our county that are just as poor.
But the perception of Moore County is that we're one of the more well-off counties. That's
exactly
always been the case.
When you think of Moore County,
and
you think of Pinehurst,
golf.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Golf, horses,
Mm-hmm.
And you do think of those parts, but frankly, that's a relatively small portion of the county. We do have a lot of residents there, but we have it's a big county.
Right.
I've driven across it from one end to the other and didn't realize how big it was until then.
Right.
And so those kinds of areas, we have typically in Moore County, you're an old New York guy, so maybe you remember Dave Kingman.
Oh, very well.
Okay.
Sure do.
So I call it the Dave Kingman effect.
Okay.
And that is that we're up there trying to hit home runs.
20 strikes and 1 home run.
Exactly. So we're hitting 50 home runs, which is great.
Right.
But we're striking out 500 times.
That's right. That's a good analogy.
And for those of us who remember Dave Kingman, and what we need to be doing is hitting a lot more singles and,
Right.
and bunting a little bit and moving the runners
around the bases.
Sorry, I use baseball analogies because I'm a big baseball fan.
I love them.
But what I mean by that is the odds are that we are probably not going to get some big factory in Moore County that's going to employ 100, 250 people. It's unlikely because we don't have the infrastructure for it. But what we can do is we can incentivize small businesses that are trying to grow. We can incentivize entrepreneurs, which, as you know, was what I have been trying to do for the past 5 years, to create 10 small businesses that each might employ 10 people. And that's the way we're going to get 100 jobs. And one of the things that we have to do in order to do that is we have to improve our broadband service. So we have to be able to get broadband not only better in Pinehurst, but better in Robbins or better in Vass. I still own, but I have this little gaming company, and we had very, very high speed. We paid a lot of money for very high speed computers. And I had a kid call me who lived in Cameron. And he said, Mr. Simon, can I come down to the shop on a closed day and download some stuff? And I said, why would you want to do that? He said, it will be faster for me to drive down to the store, download it there, and then drive back home than it would be for me to try to download it from my house.
That's how slow it is.
That's how slow it is.
Right.
And, you know, these days, with technology being what it is, with the internet being what it is, if you don't have internet service, how are you going to create a business? You have to be able to access that. And so that's a big part of what we need to be doing differently. And our state legislature is, you know, putting nickels and dimes toward it and not doing anything about it. And there are experts in rural development. The Rural Center is a great one. And it's one of the things that they're picking up on now, too, that we need to push broadband out to these areas. And that will allow these entrepreneurs to create businesses.
You were referencing the sales tax, and you need to bring me up to speed. We've had shows about it over the last year and a half. It's kind of convoluted as to what's going on. And is it supposed to be on the ballot in November this year?
It is convoluted, and it's getting, unfortunately, a little bit more confusing than it needs to be.
Okay.
The sales tax, and what we're talking about, is a quarter cent. So,
Yep.
yeah.
Barely
25 cents on
didn't
$100.
pass, right.
Well, yes. We tried this 2 years ago.
Right.
And there were some problems with, and one of the things that they learned, you know, the school board learned was, and the county commissioners, was that how you word it on the ballot, you have to really explain to people exactly what this money is going to be used for, because nobody wants sales taxes that just for anything for anybody to do what they want. And this particular sales tax that we're talking about, its intention was to help pay for the debt service on these bonds that we just voted for the schools,
right,
which I worked very hard to get passed.
Right.
And our county commissioners, along with a lot of other leaders, our county manager, Wayne Vest, Ken Bird was there. You know, a lot of people went to the state legislature because our representative, Jamie Bowles, had said, I will get this through. I will get an amendment written that will allow you to the county commissioners to be more specific about the wording on the ballot, so that everyone knows that the only reason for the sales tax increase, which, you know, I have mixed emotions about sales tax increases because they tend to be regressive, but the only purpose for this will be to pay for schools, to pay for the debt service on the bonds, to pay for if we need a repair or something, you know, that couldn't be used for anything else. And Jamie brought it to his bosses in the legislature, and they turned him away and said, we're not going to do it because it has the T word in it, and we're not going to touch anything that has the T word in it. Even though all it was really about was wording.
Right.
And, unfortunately, something similar to that happened also with Pine Sage. I don't know if you know about...
The water, yeah.
Yeah, they wanted to de-annex from Taylortown.
Mm-hmm.
And Taylortown was agreeable to it. And it turned out, and Jamie again said, I promise I'm going to take care of this, and brought it to his bosses at the legislature, and they again turned him away.
Mm-hmm.
They de-annexed 3 other areas in the state, but not the one that we wanted in Moore County. And that to me tells us a little bit about what's important to those folks, not people, but party politics.
So the party leadership, big picture, usurped that effort on Moore County's part, is in your opinion?
My opinion is that our representative was ineffective in getting what we knew was the best thing for our constituents, for our citizens, for Moore County folks.
Right.
And he was not able to get it done, even though he had committed to getting it done to those people. And, some of that goes back to what we were talking about in terms of just party over people and
right.
just, North Carolina's motto is, what it seemed, to be, not to seem.
Mm-hmm.
And I think somebody's got that turned upside down.
Part of me would like an opportunity to have both you and Jamie come on the show maybe in October.
I would love to talk with Jamie about these things.
And have a conversation, because
sure.
I'll tell you, I'm impressed that your demeanor is civil, it's fair, it's middle of the road, it's not personal, and we need that. And people will listen if you're not being so extreme. And if you're being so extreme, you're just polarizing the people that are out there. And I have a feeling the two of you would have a very good, fair-minded interaction. And that's what it's all about, isn't it?
And it is. And Representative Bowles and I have had some good interactions in the past because we know each other.
Yeah.
And I think we would be civil to each other, and I would relish the opportunity to talk about some of the issues with him.
Let's try to do that. I have a question or two before we wrap up. You're not politicking to party. You're really trying to campaign to just people, pretty much. Is that a fair statement? No, maybe it's not a fair statement.
I am trying to reach out to everyone.
Right.
I am a Democrat. I'm a lifelong Democrat.
Right.
I don't want to make any bones about the fact that I am a Democrat.
Right.
But I'm not extreme in any way. I think, hopefully listening to me for the past hour or so, that I'm not extreme in my thinking. I like to think of myself as, I like to say I'm socially liberal and fiscally conservative.
Funny, that's what I thought I was. And people go, well, you're not a Republican. No. It's okay. That's exactly
And I'm not a Republican. I do have to say that.
Right. That's okay.
Yeah. For the record.
Do you feel like you're getting the younger people engaged, or do you find that they are on the sidelines and distrustful of the process? I
think the answer to that is both, and that's a hard one.
Yeah.
Having been an educator and having had the relationship that I have had with my students for the past 10 years,
right.
I think we're tending to bring a lot of them back into the process.
Right.
I think we're starting to give them some reasons to be part of what we're doing. I think we still need to do more. We still need to tell them how important this is to their future. Going back to you asking me why I'm running, I used to tell my students, look, I'm old. I'm done.
Yeah.
My generation, we're finished.
Yeah.
It's up to you guys now.
Yeah.
And, of course, it dawned on me that I'm not finished.
Right.
I still got some work to do.
Yeah, you do.
So we need to get young people engaged. And so if your parents out there, tell your kids they need to register.
Yeah. People will vote if they feel empowered. People will vote if they feel like their vote means something. And as the last national election proved, a lot of people did not feel that way and sat at home.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not it's not a partisan comment. It's just a fact that people have given up, that gave up hope. Why should I go vote? My vote doesn't matter. It does matter.
It does matter.
It does matter.
And I think, I think people felt like they didn't have good choices.
Yeah.
And I would like to think that we are presenting them with good choices now.
Right. And it starts at the state level. And, one of the things about Moore County that I really like is people can do things within Moore County and get things done where we look after each other. We don't always rely on the state and the federal. And there are a lot of very giving people in Moore County beyond all the extreme rhetoric that's going out. And I see it at this table quite a bit. Would like to invite you to come back. And
love to.
Once October turns into and we get into election season where people are really paying attention, but I hope people will listen to this. Where can people go if they want to get on your website, your Facebook page?
So the easy way to find me is through my website, which is, of course, www.simon4, that is spelled out, F-O-R, 4nchouse.com. SimonForNCHouse.com.
It's almost intuitive.
Yeah, and it's not the most creative name, but hopefully it's memorable.
To say.
Right. And Facebook, same. Facebook is Simon for House, so we shortened it up just a little bit, but I'm really easy. You can just do a Facebook search for me as Lowell Simon, and you'll find me, and you'll find my site, my Facebook page. We're on Twitter. We're on Instagram.
Okay.
So we're pretty easy to find.
And we'll create a podcast of this broadcast. It'll air again tomorrow evening, Sunday evening, but we'll make sure there's a podcast of this so people who have not heard it will have a chance to hear it. Thank you. Thanks for coming in, and thank you for what you're doing. And I'm wishing you the very best.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to talk to voters and reach out to people. And like we said early on, be part of the process. Get out and vote.
I spoke to someone running for political office, and I don't have a headache. I'm very happy. It was a pleasure.
That's a good thing.
Thanks, Lo. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Everybody have a great week.